Bill Clinton in the 1990s, it was all about empathy and sympathy. I can't stand the word empathy, actually. I think empathy is a made-up New Age term that does a lot of damage, but it is very effective when it comes to politics. Sympathy I prefer more than empathy. That's a separate topic for a different time.
How do we analyze the legacy of a racist bigot such as Charlie Kirk from the lens of hip-hop? He was somebody who regularly not only attacked the art form,
Kendrick Lamar, Drake.
Oh, yeah, I think they're both awful.
but also attacked the people of the art form, black and brown people.
Do you think the average black kid in Compton is listening to Beethoven or some sort of gangster rap music that glorifies gangster culture?
The thing about Charlie's persistent critical nature of hip hop was that it wasn't necessarily specifically about just musical taste. It was a fundamental rejection of the genre, culture's fundamental political roots, alongside a dismissal of the communities of black and brown people that the culture represents. His views, which subsequently cast hip hop as a primary source, in a way, of societal decay.
We need more young blacks to be able to look up to role models that are not leaving all the time and are not just saying, hey, I impregnated her, so be it. It's a toxin. And if we don't address that as the root cause, it's white supremacy.
The stuff that the world tends to push forward about black men is hard to be supportive of. I get it. But you also have to be critical about how these things end up in your face, because as soon as a black man acts a donkey in public or does do something dysfunctional, all the cameras and the microphones show up.
Do you think there's systematic functions in place that prevent African Americans from moving upward?
No, does not exist.
Among black families, the children whose parents were in the bottom fifth, 54% of them stayed in the bottom fifth. So that's more than half, compared to 31% of poor white children. So it's hard for children to escape from the bottom, but harder for black children than white children.
Charlie Kirk's beliefs stood in direct opposition of the foundational nature and the voice of what hip hop stands for, but also as a voice for the marginalized groups connected to hip hop. And it reveals a deeper ideological war, if you will, against the people that, and the principles that the genre and the culture champions. When you think of hip hop's birth in the Bronx in the 1970s, when you think of the Robert Moses Expressway, when you think about how these neighborhoods were decimated and how this genre was formed, when you think of the benign neglect that led to the Bronx's burning, rap music and the people that are part of it was not created in a vacuum. It was a creative response to the literal ashes. And it was a way for black and Puerto Rican youth to build something from nothing.
I grew up in the Bronx during the 60s. It was like Beirut, in certain parts of the Bronx, man. I mean, when they say the Bronx was burning, the Bronx was burning.
South Bronx, where we lived at, people were struggling, man. You had single parents. They were on welfare. People wasn't really working. There wasn't really no jobs and stuff like that. Certain areas, man, you couldn't go in that area. You couldn't go in this area. You couldn't go in that area. You had killings. You had muggings. You had people getting killed by the police, people going to jail for the rest of their lives.
It was that boiling point to just give birth to something from nothing. And out of all that turbulence and upheaval was the birth of hip hop.
When you have this understanding of history, the political nature of our country, and you see how Charlie Kirk's viewpoints stood in opposition, it's easy to understand why people that are black, people that are of the hip hop ilk, are people that are maybe left on the political spectrum, more so than the right, even more than liberal and Democrats. It's easy to see why they are completely non-affected emotionally and have no empathy for somebody who literally has no empathy for them. When hip hop and the pillars of hip hop, DJing or MCing, breakdancing, graffiti, you could even say knowledge of self, right? These pillars are forms of creative expression and community building, and in a way, kind of reclaiming public space. I mean, even think of like graffiti on a train car. It's like art in a public space, in a place where people aren't allowed. Or maybe not even allowed, just that the city doesn't care about. When we think back to the original, political roots of hip hop, when you think of the message, and sure, hip hop is formed from a party. 𝗕𝗥𝗓𝗡𝗚, you can argue with whoever you want to argue about. Like, some people are going to be like, well, it actually started here. That's neither here nor there right now. But sure, there's a fundamental enjoy yourself amongst everything burning around you type of thing that's happening, right? But when you think of the message, it wasn't a party record. It was raw, it was unfiltered, and it was a report on what is going on with New York City, Bronx, politics, poverty, systemic oppression, and desperation, essentially. And at the core, when you think about hip hop music,
hip hop culturally.
When you think about hip hop as a culture, less alone the popularized rap genre, which sometimes, I feel, sure, some rap is a part of hip hop, but sometimes rap is just rap. I'm not going to call Tom McDonald hip hop, because he's not.
Shot down and he was barely 31. Another woke coward took a life with a gun.
But hip hop still lives by these pillars. When you go from the message and then you go a little bit further into Public Enemy. Fight the Power wasn't just a song. It was a statement. It was an anthem. When you think about NWA's Fuck the Police, that was live reporting of what is happening, in Ronald Reagan's cracked out 80s.
Fuck the police coming straight from the underground. A young nigga got it bad 'cause I'm brown.
I mean, that was a direct response from police brutality in black communities. I know that the things that I'm mentioning right now, for anybody that's on this channel, this is a very nuanced, most of y'all are like, yeah, I already know this stuff. Yeah, but maybe this will reach a broader audience. I want people to understand why people like Charlie Kirk are not going to be celebrated in death from certain people, such as myself. When you think about hip hop and the core tenets of hip hop, at its root, hip hop is about speaking truth to power, if you will. It's about documenting struggle, if you will. And it's about celebrating resilience. And these themes are inherently political. And these themes align often with leftist ideologies. In so many ways, Charlie Kirk was the younger representative of a lot of very problematic conservative ideals that were damaging and stood at the opposition of progression and change for the better for marginalized people and people that aren't cis heterosexual males.
If I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. It begs the question, when you see a black pilot, you wonder, you say, I hope they are qualified. Dealing with somebody in customer service who's a moronic black woman. I wonder, is she there because of her excellence, or is she there because of affirmative action? It almost creates thought patterns that are not necessarily wholesome. You're going to remove my appendix and you're a black lesbian.
Doing what I love has been kind of taken away from me to please other people. Yeah, that's the point, Simone Biles. You're representing your nation, you selfish sociopath. You kidding me? We are raising a generation of weak people like Simone Biles. She's immature and she is a shame to the country.
And we know he's not very smart. He does these press conferences where he thinks he's making sense spiritually and freedom of speech. But he's a product of his time. What would you expect from LeBron James? Thomas Sowell and Justice Clarence Thomas are far better black role models to celebrate than Martin Luther King.
And one of the biggest things in that is his war on woke. Wokeism.
I think woke is dead.
His war on woke was very interesting because woke has been co-opted by the corny white Republicans that want to make it mean something that it's not.
The woke movement was supposed to be about people of color, not getting opportunities, the at-bats that they deserved, finally making that happen. And it was about that for about 8 seconds.
When you look at and you think about Black Lives Matter, for example, Black Lives Matter as an organization is one thing. Black Lives Matter as a statement is another. They're two separate things, right? You can be critical of an organization and how it spends its money and its resources, but to be critical of the statement Black Lives Matter as a statement that essentially is saying, hey, Black Lives Matter too. We would like to not die. And then to be critical of that And then to portray it as not a human's right movement, but instead like this Marxist, anti-American organization is disingenuous. And it's at complete opposition of everything that I'm talking about here today, about people that are from hip hop and may live a little bit more on the left side of the political spectrum. Even Trump's statements after Charlie Kirk was killed was an attack on leftism.
It's a long past time for all Americans and the media to confront the fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequence of demonizing those with whom you disagree day after day, year after year. For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now.
Which in essence is an attack on anybody that holds the values of leftists. Charlie Kirk stands on the side of anti-immigration.
Not just trying to transform the politics, they're trying to change the type of thing that we are. They want you to get used to living amongst foreigners. Immigration, both legal and illegal, the thing that we are starts to change.
I have a wife that's an immigrant. I don't want her to have to feel afraid for no reason. This administration that was highly promoted and pushed by people such as Charlie Kirk are at direct opposition to the well-being of my own family, my friends, and the people that I care about. So please forgive me if I don't have empathy for somebody who doesn't have empathy for me. The clash between Charlie Kirk's ideology and hip-hop's ethos was not only inevitable, but irreconcilable. And I probably butchered that word. He stood for a vision of America that was fundamentally at odds with the reality that hip hop has been documenting since the 1980s for over 50 years. His was a prescriptive video of what America should be, while hip hop is a view into what America actually is for many marginalized groups. And he stood in direct opposition of that. Consider the power of culture in the political landscape. What does it mean when the leaders of this nation don't just despise the music or a genre of music, but despise the people and the reality that it represents? I'll leave you with that. This has been a much deeper dive into my Unpacked series. I'm Sean Longevity, with the New Old Heads podcast and Bringing Down the Band. And typically these Unpacked series, I do deeper dives on New Old Heads podcast, episodes, but this one was a little bit different. Let me know what you think about it. If you want to support, the things that I'm doing here and the things that we're doing with the podcast, please consider becoming a Patreon member or just subscribe and hit the notification button so I can actually reach you. But yeah, check out patreon.com/newoldheads, and thanks for watching. Peace.